Thank you, Becky. Oh, thank you, Andy. I tell you what, y'all talked about cloning yourselves. I'm all for it. I want to clone. I thought we could just clone you like 95 times and put you in every county in Tennessee. We'd be really thankful. So keep working on that process. And thank you also to all the partner panelists who've talked today, all the speakers who have been a part of this. I have learned some new things that I'm taken back and excited about, and just love to hear what's going on here in Johnson City. Thank you for coming. Thank all of you who are here for coming. How many of you are not from Tennessee? Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Oh, how many of you are not from Johnson City? How about you? Lots of you. Oh, this is wonderful. Well, what a wonderful, wonderful day we've had. And it's not over yet. It's not over yet. There's another wonderful speaker coming. Not me, after me. You know, you've heard from the experts, but I'm in no way an expert or anywhere near have the experience that they do in executing systems of care, but I do know that this is important. This matters. As I think Becky said, it's like we found the cure to cancer and we've got to tell everybody. I also have had the privilege of observing from a bird's eye view what's been going on all across the state of Tennessee for the last few years. And so that's been exciting to watch. We're so proud of Johnson City, and I think this is really going to be a model for the rest of Tennessee and and hopefully for other cities and other states. And from the beginning of my husband's first term as governor, he said he wanted to focus on making Tennessee the best place to live and work and raise a family. And I think all governors say that, don't they? Anyway, but his priorities really broke down into working on education, K-12 education and higher education, and working on bringing jobs to Tennessee, better jobs for our educated, hopefully, workforce, and efficient and effective government. And they may not seem connected, but you know they are. A strong economy builds a skilled workforce, and a skilled workforce begins with healthy, educated children who are able to succeed because they've been nurtured and supported. And in fact, one of the reasons I chose early literacy to work on, and parent engagement as my focus as First Lady, was that I knew that education was a great gateway to a successful life, and I wanted that for our young children, and we are very far behind, but we're getting better, and that's the good news. We have more to do, but we're getting better. But you look at all that, and when I first became First Lady, I had lots of people come and tell me, why don't you work on this, and why don't you work on that? And there's so many different issues that you can work on as a First Lady, or First Gentleman. But we know that if our children are stressed and distracted, then they're not going to get the full benefits of school and of learning. And in fact, their brains won't allow them to. They won't be wired to allow it. And when I heard about ACEs and I heard about trauma-informed care, I thought, this could help every one of these problems that have been brought to me that people are saying we need to work on. So over the past several years, we've come to know more about ACEs and their effects and how to build resiliency. I first heard about this in Memphis, actually. And I was invited to a meeting in Memphis and came to that meeting, and they had every important leader of the community in a room. They had everybody. They had the chief of police, they had the nonprofit leaders, they had the government leaders, they had everybody, and they were talking about this very topic. And I'd never heard about it before until then. And I got so excited about it, I said, we've got to tell the rest of the state about this. We've got to work on this everywhere. Little did I know that Johnson City was already working on it. I didn't even know you were up here with that. I really kind of thought it started in Memphis, but I think it really started here. But it started on two ends of our state, which was wonderful. And then the government heard about it and said, let's build on this. Let's take this and let's make it statewide. And so we've had a lot going on in the last 8 years. In the last 8 years, in my personal life, I've gone from 0 grandchildren to 8 grandchildren. Wow. And so I've looked at little babies a lot, and I've thought about their brains, and I've held them in my arms, and I've thought, what a treasure. And I've thought about the other babies in Tennessee and what they're going through, and the other children in Tennessee. And I think back to when I was a new mom. You just can't help it, but in many ways it's the same, but in so many ways it's different. Raising a family is harder today. And we know so much more now about child health and brain development and social emotional wellness than ever before. And we have so much more great scientific information that we've studied and tested and retested, as we've talked about today. And we know there's so many factors that impact a child's development. They all work together at the same time to determine who that little boy or little girl is going to be. We know now that the foundations of learning, brain development, and social emotional wellness, the trajectory of a child's life, are all set down from a child's earliest experiences. We know that newborns form 700 to 1,000 new connections, synapses, between their neurons every second, and that 80% of a child's brain is developed by age 3 and 90% by kindergarten. We know that by age 1, the critical brain connections that determine how clever or creative or imaginative a child may be are already in place. And at age 1, a child will have learned all of the sounds making up the native language that he or she will speak. When you bring toxic stress into that picture, whether it be abuse or neglect, household dysfunction like physical or emotional abuse, divorce in the family, living with an incarcerated parent, living in poverty, when you bring toxic stress into the picture, that critical brain development is impacted. And there's a much higher likelihood for that beautiful child to experience all kinds of health, economic, social, behavioral issues down the road. So this cycle can be very hard to escape, and that's why the work we're doing with trauma-informed care is so important. And as we've said before, we're changing the question from what's wrong with this child to what happened to this child. We know that just one caring adult, we said this earlier today too, one caring adult can be all the difference in a child's life. To start building that resilience, to help their brain bounce back from that toxic stress and give them a much better chance of growing up healthy. We know that it matters to focus on building emotionally healthy children from the very beginning of life, rather than waiting for these unacceptable situations to impact their success. So trauma-informed care seems to be the solution for prevention and for mitigation. And of course, systems of care are also important for adults too, who are dealing with ACEs. And we want them to know they're valued members of our community and that they can build resilience even now, acknowledging their difficult lives and circumstances, and hopefully providing access to opportunities and services for them to help them become healthier as they try to break these intergenerational cycles. This is important for our entire state and really for our country. Tennessee has been working on this, other states are working on this. It's important for economic development, my husband would say. It's important for education, but most significantly, it's important to the people and the individuals in our communities who struggle and who have no hope. So to me and to my husband, and he got this pretty quickly, you know? It's not a hard thing to understand. It's simple. And he got it very quickly and was right on board with it, so I was proud of him. But it just makes sense to support ACEs education and trauma-informed care as a statewide effort in your states. It just makes sense to dedicate, as my husband has done, $2.45 million in recurring dollars in our state budget to fund ACEs-focused projects across the state. It makes sense to involve our hospitals, our universities, our schools, our nonprofits, our aftercare programs, our creative communities to spread the word about this. It makes sense to consider ACEs in our juvenile justice system and our foster care system. And we know that this work has the potential to provide incredible outcomes in each of these areas. But while taking care of our Tennesseans may just make sense, it is no small task. It is a lot of work. And as you've seen, all the work that's gone into the programs here in Johnson City and all the work that they've done from early in the mornings and on vacations, and oh my gosh, my hat is off to you. So much hard work has gone into this, but it is worth it. And I have to say, we are so grateful to the many people, some of which you've heard from today, dedicated people who have, and partnered organizations from across this region and across our state who are working on this. So I've had the honor of getting to know other First Ladies involved in this work, and we have a little gathering sometimes and we talk about what we're working on. Casey Family Foundation convened a small group of First Ladies in Wisconsin with the Wisconsin governor's wife, Jeanette Walker, and so we talked about these things and talked about how we could work in our own states, what's been going on and what's happening, and learn from each other. And then Casey Family Foundation's also had another meeting in DC where we talked some more about that. So we're building and learning from each other. And there are a lot of states working on this, and so that's a wonderful thing. But I have to say, I think Tennessee is one of the states that is at the forefront of this work, and that makes me really proud. And so many of you here are to thank for that, and I know some of them have also left, but thank you so much for your work in this across this region, and how that reflects on to the rest of Tennessee, and what we're going to learn from you in the future. And we have 5 more months in this role, maybe 4. It's going fast, but I know, I'm confident that this work will continue, and we will be so proud of what we see as the fruit of this work in the future. So now I have the pleasure to introduce someone to you who is one of those dedicated individuals I just talked about. And we've saved the best for last. Mary Rolando has been at the helm of Tennessee's ACES initiative from the very beginning. And it's thanks to her tireless work and her creative thoughtfulness and her fiery perspective that our state's Building Strong Brains initiative has done so well. It is spread, it is strategic, it has just been a wonderful program that we're so proud of. And she's very humble, so she won't say anything about what all she has done, but she won't even let me put her name in her report. But I'm very grateful to have her here today. I'm very grateful that she's part of our state government. I'm very proud of her, and she's here to tell you more about it. So please help me welcome Mary Rolando.
I too appreciate that all of you have stayed here for the day. It's been jam-packed. And when I looked last night to see what time we were going to start, and it was 8 o'clock, Eastern time. That was 7 o'clock body time. And so I think that it is a real testimony to all of you that you've stayed this entire time. I want to congratulate Becky, you and Andy for a good job well done today, because we have people who are in awe. Dan Press has probably as good a perspective on the nationwide effort in this area, and I think that I speak for Dan when saying it's almost overwhelming to try to integrate everything that's been accomplished. And then Dr. Gillece, I think, good call on your part to say we need to have a summit in Upper East. So thank you for getting this summit off the ground. It's a real pleasure to get to talk about this work. And I will say that it was gratifying to see that there are people from out of state who are still here, because some of this information is going to be that many have seen several times over. Not the least of which is our mission statement, which we developed in the fall of 2015. Following the convening of our first ACES Summit, which was intended to be a meet and greet, but ended up being our first exposure to the scientific communications work that was being done with frameworks with whom we were privileged to then participate for 18 months very vigorously. We recently changed our mission, which is that we are here to change the culture in Tennessee so that the state's overarching philosophy, policies, programs, and practices for children, youth, and young adults utilize the latest brain science to prevent and mitigate the impact of adverse childhood experiences. The change was that we inserted very clearly that we expected the science to be applied to youth and young adults, not just in early childhood, because we certainly did not want anyone to think that in adolescence that someone was a throwaway, because we know they're not. And so what we did is conceptualize how we might go about that culture change. It was very gratifying to hear one of the most recent panelists talk about transforming the system, because we really are out to transform the culture that does result in that question of not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And so the way we conceptualized it was that we wanted to penetrate the philosophy and approach, policies and funding, the programs and services, and the professional practice in all of those sectors that you see that are identified there, including the justice system, healthcare, human services, faith-based communities, education and early care, media, mental health and substance abuse, philanthropy, child welfare, and business and corporations. And so to get this off the ground then, what we did was develop a very small coordinating team that's interdisciplinary. I just get to work with the group Among others here today who are participating are Sue Letha Keller, who is toward the back of the room, Pat Connor, who's our education specialist in the group, and others. And we are guided by a public sector steering group. One of the biggest champions for this work is our Deputy Governor, Jim Henry. And even in advance of the first summit that we had, he indicated to each of the child serving departments that he wanted them to identify a couple of ranking people in their respective departments who would have the authority to help guide the project and to be in touch frequently with their commissioners who would help to guide this. And so we knew that we were going to have a tremendous amount of state support, state government support. But even with that, from the very beginning, one of the tenets of this work was that the solutions are at the community level. And certainly everything that we've heard today and what you've accomplished here and have a sense of where you're going ahead, going on, is representative of the need to have the private sector and the communities to solve problems. And so we developed a private sector steering group. And among those are the trade organizations, providers, representatives of the faith-based community, philanthropists, the foundations, and the like. And we've tried to represent people who may have been had the effect of ACEs by including like Project Return, which works with prisoners and the like. And so we each of these groups meet on a quarterly basis. Our little coordinating team meets once a week at 10 o'clock on Wednesday mornings. You can miss it, but most people don't because that's where we get a lot of this work done. And our good fortune is then that we've been supported by foundations and in-kind resources of Tennessee state government. Particularly notable is the support of the ACE Awareness Foundation, which is Memphis-based, and the First Lady mentioned also Casey Family Programs. They've just been invaluable in helping us to fund activities that we wouldn't necessarily be able to support through state government. So what has made Building Strong Brains Tennessee unique? We think it's two things. Primarily the integration and application of brain science and communication science. It's been very gratifying to hear people use language today that is that common lens and common approach. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And I'm going to talk about communication science. But one of the things that struck me about the conversation today is that many of you identified activities that are really a function of the principles of safety science, which is how do you reduce the likelihood that individual human error will contribute to some bad outcome? Excuse me. And so, and among the things that I would cite there would be, you've talked about huddles and debriefs, you've talked about self-care, recognizing when you're overloaded. So I want to acknowledge that you've really, really integrated safety science into this work too. And then the other thing is we're the envy of the nation because as the First Lady indicated, we do have dedicated appropriations for community innovations. So let's talk about the two sciences for just a moment. We have learned a lot through working with the Frameworks Institute, which is the leading communication science organization. They say in the United States, but it's actually the Western Hemisphere. They are the organization that researched, tested, and found that toxic stress, for example, was a term that one might use in that 2-minute elevator speech with the CEO of a bank. And if they had no knowledge about early childhood development, they would understand what it meant to the effect of toxic stress on children. So we've been really, really blessed to have that relationship. And quite honestly, I will say that when we were developing the initial summit, one of us, a guy from Memphis at that time, was looking for a public health message for Memphis, Shelby County that would say, ACEs no demographic, socioeconomic, geographic boundaries, so it wouldn't be about those people again. And so we said, well, let's go ahead and talk with Frameworks, see if they would help us with a call to action. And they said no. But what they did come back with is a plan that we were able to, thank you so much. with a plan that we were able, oh, that helped for a moment. Anyway, we came back with a plan to actually to accomplish to accomplish over an 18-month period what we refer to as the knowledge mobilization path. The knowledge mobilization path is jargon, and so we have to always remind ourselves, with those who work with this on a day-to-day basis, that it's greater than a public awareness campaign, even though public awareness is really important. It is, how do you take this important integration of brain and communication science and penetrate the state in the way that there's evidence today with the language that's being used that this is being accomplished. And so over an 18-month period, we had 3 scientific symposia, basically the same cadre of 150 or so people participated in these, and the reason we have the same people attending is that these grew on each other. And so the first was the science of biology and physical science. That's where we learned a lot about, brain science, epigenetics, and the like. The second was the science of programmatic innovations. That permitted us to bring in people from around the country who really are experts in saying, how can we do things newly, just how communities can address their priorities. I encourage you to look at San Diego, because they have some very, very robust metrics in which they actually relinquish the control of their government to say to communities, what can you do in your area? There are basically 5 boroughs, or the equivalent of 5 boroughs in San Diego, and they have done that very, very, very well. Interspersed with that, with the symposia, were 4 frame labs. How many people in here have been to a frame lab? Good. And so you know that it's a deep dive into brain science and communication science. It's basically the application of communication science to brain science. So the very, very intense 2 days of interactive practice. We followed by a period of about a month where you go and apply what you've learned to all of your communication, whether when it's appropriate, whether it's a memo about something that you need to have done relative to your program, if it's an editorial, an op-ed piece, if it's a message to your superior about why you want to do something newly relative to ACEs informed work in early childhood development. So in that instance, a cadre of 40 people those were repetitions of each other. So 40 people went through Frame Lab 1, a cohort of people went through Frame Lab 2, Frame Lab 3, Frame Lab 4, and it was so gratifying to see people of the stature of yourselves who are already very, very informed who wanted to participate in this. And then I think we cannot say enough about training for trainers. Melissa gave me an update just before making these comments, because in the original plan we thought that we would reach about 350 people over a year's time, and now here we are 2 years later, and primarily attributable to the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. Almost 800 people have gone through Train for Trainer, and the reach has been right at 35,000 people across the state. So in appreciating those applause very much, I wonder if our friends and colleagues associated with TCCY will please stand and be recognized. Their relatively new boss, Richard Kennedy, who has succeeded Linda O'Neill, who retired recently, said that in being responsible for organizing the initial Train for Trainers, that when it came to the holidays, nobody was speaking with him because the training was still going on at great speed during that time. But I think it's been really significant and the outcomes are great. And then an adaptation of that was Building Strong Brains, Strategies for Tennessee educators. And I have to say that we took a little money off the top of the initial $1.25 million that we got for both the Train the Trainer effort and for prompting the Conditions of Learning conference that was held annually by the Department of Education. And again, when I asked for an update, Pat Connor, please stand. Pat Connor is with the State Department of Education and has been the principal person responsible for, now get this, over 7,000 educators and teachers having been trained, 161 administrators as of last week in a 4-day effort. And then in changing the model for how education would reach out into the school system, changing the model for how education would reach out into the school systems. Instead of having training of this sort, they have received applications from at least 82 schools to become trauma-informed schools, in which an individual in each of those schools would then train on-site every day, whatever is needed. And so when I asked for an update for that, that 82 was up by 30 just from last week. Yay! I'm now up to 100. So, the reach is great. And we've had the tremendous support in this effort to get the message out there with strong support from the major state departments. And I was so appreciative. I think it was Stacy who mentioned training foster parents in ACEs related things. The Department of Children's Services is integrating all of the ACEs and Building Strong Brains into the PATH training for all new foster parents. So that is really a huge step forward, among other things. One of the atypical partners in this has been the Department of Correction. And when I say it's atypical, many of these agencies are represented in the Three Branches Institute, which is something that Governor Haslam developed in the summer of 2012 to bring the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branches together to form a common agenda to advance child welfare and to realign the justice system. And one of the really good things that occurred was to identify the Department of Correction as a participant in that. And at the recent 3BI meeting, it was really quite something to have Commissioner Tony Parker, who introduced and set up for us a video that is available on YouTube, in which they depict a small but really important program in the West Tennessee women's prison, in which they are fostering attachment and parenting by allowing women who meet the criteria, which would be good performance, good participation, and working their program, to have their children come to a home-like setting within the prison that is segmented away from it, so that when the children come, they don't have to see like guards and they have to go through the security, of course, but they're not exposed to some of the things that in and of itself would create trauma. And it's a lesson about what it is that these women need in order to be able to be successful parents, or more successful parents, when they are through their programs. And so it was really remarkable then to see that they've made it age appropriate, so that the living areas for the little bitty ones has bassinets, has everything that one might want. They learn that you put the baby safely sleeping on its back, not on its tummy, that kind of thing. In the area where the adolescents are, it's all Star Wars. It's very, very cool. Kids want to be there. And then with regard to the detention center and the modification of that this morning and the artwork, part of what's in the video is artwork that was done by the women who live there. And it's really, really something. But what was really important was that the commissioner owned that he doubted that this was something that would work. He said, I didn't see that this would be something that would be so important, but recognized that it was. So I think we'll see that grow. So it's one of those small steps that's a huge step forward. Talked about Department of Education. Department of Health has had one key person in every health department who's been trained in all manner of trauma-informed responsiveness and ACEs, with the responsibility of training everybody else in their program. Human Services has had policy changes in their contracts, which requires their providers to be, ACEs informed and trauma responsive. The same goes for mental health and substance abuse. And then I want to note particularly the Office of Criminal Justice Programs, because it's pretty notable that they have put money into Building Strong Brains Tennessee as a part of their prevention efforts. And so we're really grateful for something that they did relative to media. And then we think of TennCare as the behemoth because it's big. And yet what they've done with getting the leadership of the managed care organizations to become trauma-informed is really quite remarkable. And they have looked at what it is that their intake people do, how they respond, and the like. So it's really important. I acknowledge the Commission on Children and Youth. And then in honor of the contributions of Deputy Governor Jim Henry for this, the University of Tennessee College of Social Work has done an extensive evaluation of this. But nothing is more important, though, than the community innovations, because that is where we've had the luxury of dollars. And while we were going down this knowledge mobilization path in the spring of 2016, thinking that we would come back with community plans, the governor did surprise us by putting $1.25 million into his budget. So we said, aha, we can't say to the governor, give us a year, then we'll take the dollars. And so we put out an announcement of funds and got back, so we had $1.25 million. I think we got something close to 78 or 79 proposals for a total value of over $8 million. That said, there was both interest, capacity, and the need was great. We chose 13 projects. In FY18, we had a total of 16 projects, 8 of which were carryover, 8 of which were new. And then this year, we were so surprised and so appreciative of what the First Lady has identified as the administration, the governor recommended, and the legislature appropriated $2.45 million in state appropriations for community activities, with no greater definition than that. So people have asked, well, how do you make decisions about this? Why are you just getting, proposals that throw in everything but the kitchen sink? No, we always have criteria, and among them is that there has to be evidence that the proposal either is evidence-based and/or has a strong logic model and is appropriate for the community in which the activity is going to occur, and that your partners are on board and will help move the projects forward. So of those 10 areas that I pointed out at the beginning, the 10 sectors, I'm really pleased that we now have projects in 9 of the 10 sectors. And I'm using up my time sufficient that I think I'm not going to be able to talk about all of these, but I will say that with academia, Belmont has done something similar to what ETSU is accomplishing with bringing together a common curriculum in a multidisciplinary area. But this year, they are adding on to their School of Nursing, OT, PT, Education, Social Work, Theology. And so with mentioning the faith-based community, I think that's been really important. I want to highlight the ETSU biostats, the work with the student body, and how important that is. That's to be applauded. I could go on and on about several of these. There are, but again, the issues of community are great and they are different across the state. And so, you've got little bitty Grundy County who gets a total of $14,200 a year. and what they've done in reducing the chronic absenteeism of children who are at risk of having greater problems is really, really significant. And then in education, there has been a tremendous amount of work done that I think is going to be replicable in other areas. And then I do want to take a moment under justice and the courts to identify that it's so great what you've been doing here. And so we were able to fund the Jackson Police Department, in which every person associated with the department will go through trauma training of a sort that is appropriate for police and police support systems, so that they will recognize what the issues of trauma are when they go to a family where a parent may be arrested, and or where just being there at all can be traumatizing for the children. So they'll be tracking not only the number of children, but the disposition and how to minimize the trauma of seeing one of your parents to be arrested. And I think that that can inform the kind of work that's being done here. Faith-based community was funded newly this year. The ETSU Department of Pediatrics came up. The relationship with Frontier Health has been great. And then I would say that the novelty of what was funded at WCTE Upper Cumberland was tremendous, because in coupling monies from Building Strong Brains and the Office of Criminal Justice Programs, they ended up producing 6 standalone 30-minute episodes. It is labeled as Building Strong Brains, the Tennessee Story, the Governor. Each of those episodes stands alone on a topic, with it concluding that there are solutions. But what is really cool is that the governor speaks extemporaneously about toxic stress, the difference between stress and toxic stress, the implications for children going future, and the future prosperity of the state. Those are posted on our website and the website of TCCY. So we've just had such great effort. And in being asked to say what has made this a statewide initiative, or what does it take to make this a statewide effort, I think we made some good decisions in year 1, which was we had a limited amount of money. We wanted it to be a statewide initiative. Let's pretend that we had $350,000 to put into East, Middle, and West. We weren't going to fund anything that wasn't really top flight, but we said, aha, let's do this. And so with that large number of proposals that we got, we had a lot to choose from. And so we didn't try to fit a square peg into a round hole. But when all was said and done, when we started looking at what we had funded among the sectors, we saw that we were starting to grow and grow and grow. So this represents where the projects are funded this year that really do make this a statewide initiative, and I think an effort that the administration and the communities can be proud of. And so to run forward with this, because I have gone over my time, we're in a strategic planning process, because certainly with being in the recurring budget, we know this work is going to endure for a period of time. And where we are right now is a benchmark. We need to recognize that, first of all, that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but it has felt like a marathon for the last 3 years, and we've accomplished a lot. So with this word cloud, when asked to identify 3 descriptors or characteristics of what this has been about, the words that are in the largest type represent the ones that were most frequently identified. So it's innovation, informative, expansionary, visionary, and the like. But I personally choose to point out the little word down here in red. I think this work is nascent. There is so far to go. We have the privilege of being really on the cutting edge with this, and I agree that Tennessee has the opportunity to lead the nation. There's so much further to go, but we have a lot to work from. So we have a vision for success. I'm over my time, but basically we want to move the line on ACEs. We want to see the reduction in adverse childhood experiences and the deleterious effects that they can have. And the way we would do that is by engaging stakeholders, such as you have done here, equipping providers and communities with tools and trainings, connecting learnings and sharing information, and supporting the effort with financial models and marketing and infrastructure. We'll get there by sustaining and enhancing the effective strategies that we've had to date. We need to think about how we don't continue to reinvent the wheel. We want to be good stewards of this generous appropriations for ACES related, continue to seek the input from stakeholders. And where we're falling short at this moment, but we'll get there, is engaging the business community to recognize that investments in children today is an investment in the workforce for tomorrow. So I want to thank you for the work that you do. I want to express how humbling it is to get to work with all of you in the way that this project is moving forward, because it has been really, it's a lot of fun, and it's work, but it is the kind of thing that one doesn't get to do often. So when someone said, aha, you know, this is, I think, a really, really important thing that so many people here today have used common language, have an understanding of ACES, and know that, that we can move forward to move the paradigm from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Thank you so much.
Dr. Joan Gillece to come up and give us a few wrap-up comments. She started us on this. She started us on this journey, and we want her to take us home.
Okay, thank you. Well, all I can say is, wow, Tennessee rocks. I mean, this is, you guys are just amazing. And our work is all across the country, you know, in multiple systems. And people always talk about what they're doing, and they're going to implement trauma-informed communities. And everyone spends 2 years in a conference room planning, right? You guys are doing the opposite. You guys have it flipped over. You're getting the basics, and then you're empowered, encouraged, and you are doing it for real. And I am honestly just so moved. And you have these Energizer bunnies here. And you guys are all just it's heartwarming. I said to somebody a little earlier, I said, you know, I almost feel like I've been in church. And he said, well, no, this is what church should be about. I'm like, yeah, that is very true, because you guys are just doing it. So I was been thinking, okay, what could be next steps? Number one, the Governors Association meeting. Somehow, you guys need to present there. I mean, this really needs to be presented at places where people can get as motivated and excited about it as I think you have excited all of us. How do you get it out there? We did the movie Healing Mean years ago. We've got more play out of that little very low budget video. Could you do a video on this that could be put out so everyone could see what Tennessee has done and what you continue to do? How do you spread this word out? And the other thought that I have, and you've done so really mind-blowing work, and I say that honestly, I really do. I'm not just saying this because I'm in Tennessee. You really are doing it. And I was thinking, what could be next? And I think a great next step for you guys would be to do a forum like this with people receiving services. I really think the more we all get it, not just the people that are the helpers and the healers, but the people that are needing the healing and the help, to all be a part of this and do this together, unified, really makes a difference. When we were in a women's prison last year in Alabama, 900 women, we were there in August in Alabama. Let me tell you, it was pretty warm. No air conditioning in this place, right? So in any case, we worked with all the women. We said, we don't just want to work with the staff, we want to work with the women. And what the women said to us, all of them, no one ever explained it to us like this. Why we can't get clean, why we keep going back into bad relationships, whatever it might be. And they were ready to partner then with the staff to be on the same road. So if you could do the next summit, right? We'll do another summit, right? The next summit, and to be able to have the voice of people with lived experience to help you all come together, I think you're gonna have even more robust and incredible outcomes. So it just warms my heart to think about this all happened in how many years? 3 years. Wow. You guys are all just doing incredible work, and hats off to all of you. And I just thank you for including me, and I am not holding you any longer because you've been sitting a long time. So